Jin-Ho woke up at 5 in the morning like he did every day for the past 3 years. The alarm clock buzzed loudly in his small room on level 12 of the space station. His room was tiny with just enough space for a bed, a small desk, and a closet. The walls were made of gray metal and the only window showed the endless darkness of space with tiny dots of distant stars. He got dressed in his blue maintenance uniform and walked to the cafeteria. The hallways were long and empty at this hour. Only the night shift workers were finishing their duties. Jin-Ho, like the quiet time before the station, came alive with thousands of people rushing around. The space station was massive, bigger than any city on Earth. It housed over 50,000 beings from different planets and species. The cafeteria served simple food, nothing fancy. Jin-Ho ate his breakfast of protein bars and synthetic coffee while reading the daily work schedule on his tablet. Today he would be cleaning the diplomatic wing where the most important aliens held their meetings. The diplomatic wing was the fanciest part of the station with shiny floors, marble walls, and advanced technology everywhere. Jin-Ho had been working as a maintenance worker since he was 20 years old. He was now 25 and had never complained about his job, even though it was hard work. The other humans on the station respected him because he was always helpful and never got angry. Even when things went wrong, his supervisor, Mr. Kim, always said Jin-Ho was the best worker in the maintenance department. After breakfast, Jin-Ho went to the supply room to get his cleaning equipment. He loaded his cart with mop, soap, vacuum cleaners, and polishing cloths. The cart was heavy, but Jin-Ho was strong from years of physical work. He pushed the cart through the corridors toward the diplomatic wing, passing by shops, restaurants, and offices where humans worked. The space station had been built 50 years ago when the aliens first came to Earth. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Council, and they had technology that humans could only dream of. They had faster-than-light travel energy weapons that could destroy planets and machines that could cure any disease, but they told humans that they were too primitive to use such technology. Humans were only allowed to do simple jobs on the station. They could clean, cook, serve food, and do basic repairs. The aliens did all the important work like running the government, making decisions about trade, and controlling the advanced technology. Jin-Ho had accepted this arrangement because he believed the aliens knew better than humans. As Jin-Ho entered the diplomatic wing, he saw the beautiful decorations and expensive furniture. The floors were made of a special material that glowed softly and never got dirty, but the aliens still wanted humans to clean them every day. The walls had screens showing images of different planets, and the ceiling looked like the night sky with moving stars. Jin-Ho started his work by mopping the main corridor. He worked carefully and quietly because he knew important meetings were happening in the nearby rooms. He could hear strange sounds coming from behind the closed doors, alien languages that sounded like music or wind, or sometimes like machines talking. While Jin-Ho was cleaning near the main conference room, the doors suddenly opened and aliens started walking out. The meeting was over and they were heading to their next appointments. Jin-Ho quickly moved his cart to the side and stood against the wall. He had been trained to make himself invisible when the aliens were around. The aliens were amazing to look at. Some were tall and thin with blue skin and large eyes. Others looked like walking crystals that sparkled in the light. There were aliens that floated in the air without touching the ground, and some that looked like giant insects with beautiful, colorful wings. Jin-Ho had been working here for years, but he still felt amazed every time he saw them. Among the aliens, Jin-Ho noticed some humans walking quickly, trying to keep up with their alien bosses. These humans were translators and assistants who had been chosen for their intelligence and language skills. They wore nice clothes and carried important-looking tablets and documents. Jin-Ho knew that these humans had much better jobs than him, but he never felt jealous. That was when he saw her. A young woman with long black hair was walking fast behind a group of tall alien diplomats. She was carrying a stack of tablets and documents and looked worried about being late. Her name tag said, "Hi Jin," and she was one of the human translators. Jin-Ho had seen her before, but never up close. Jin was trying to walk quickly in her formal shoes, but one of her shoelaces had come undone. She was trying to balance all the tablets while walking and looking down at her loose shoelace. She looked frustrated and worried because she could not stop to tie it without dropping everything and making the aliens wait. Jin-Ho watched as Jin struggled with her problem. She was getting more and more stressed, and he could see that she might trip and fall. If her shoelace got tangled around her foot, the tablets she was carrying looked expensive and important. If she dropped them, it would be a disaster without thinking about it. Jin-ho set down his mop and walked over to Haijin. He did not ask permission or wait for her to notice him. He simply knelt down in front of her and started tying her shoelaces. His hands were rough from years of cleaning and maintenance work, but he was gentle and careful. Haijin stopped walking and looked down at Jin-ho with surprise. She had never expected a stranger to help her, especially not a maintenance worker. Most people on the station minded their own business and did not get involved in other people's problems. But here was this man kneeling in front of her, fixing her shoelace like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jin-ho finished tying the shoelace and looked up at Haijin. Their eyes met for a moment, and something passed between them that neither of them could explain. It was not romantic love or attraction, it was something deeper, a recognition of kindness and humanity in a place where people often felt like numbers or machines. "Thank you," Haijin whispered, and her voice was soft and grateful. Jin-ho smiled and nodded, then stood up and walked back to his mop. He did not expect anything in return. He did not want her to owe him a favor or to remember his name. He had simply seen someone who needed help, and he had helped her. Haijin stood there for a moment, watching Jin-ho return to his work. Then she hurried after the alien diplomats who were waiting for her down the corridor. She felt different somehow. The simple act of kindness had reminded her that there were still good people in the world, people who cared about others even when they had no reason to. What Jin-ho did not know was that his simple gesture had been witnessed by someone very important. Ambassador Kale, one of the most powerful beings in the Galactic Council, had been walking behind the group of diplomats and had seen everything. The ambassador was tall and made of living crystal that changed colors based on his emotions. Ambassador Kale had lived for over 500 years and had traveled to thousands of planets. He had seen every kind of behavior that intelligent beings were capable of. He had seen war and peace, love and hate, wisdom and foolishness, but he had never seen anything quite like what Jin-ho had just done. The ambassador stood in the corridor for a long time after Jin-ho had gone back to his cleaning work. The crystal being was thinking about what he had witnessed. A member of what they considered a primitive species had helped another member of his species without any expectation of reward or recognition. He had simply seen a need and filled it. In all his centuries of life, Ambassador Kale had never seen such pure altruism among any species. Most beings helped others because they expected something in return, or because it made them look good, or because their society required it. But Jin-ho had helped Haijin simply because it was the right thing to do. The ambassador made a decision that would change everything. He would recommend Jin-ho for recognition by the Galactic Council. This was almost unheard of because the council rarely paid attention to individual humans, but what Jin-ho had done was special, and Ambassador Kale believed it deserved acknowledgement. As Jin-ho continued his work that day, he had no idea that his life was about to change forever. He finished cleaning the diplomatic wing and moved on to his other duties. He ate lunch with his fellow maintenance workers and listened to their stories about their families. Back on Earth, he was happy with his simple life and had no dreams of anything greater. But across the station, in the highest levels where the most important decisions were made, Ambassador Kale was filing a report about the human maintenance worker who had shown true compassion. The report would be read by the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and they would have to decide what to do about Jin-ho. That evening, Jin-ho returned to his small room and ate his dinner while watching the stars through his window. He thought about the woman whose shoelace he had tied and wondered if she had made it to her meeting on time. He hoped she had and that her day had gone well. He did not know that his simple act of kindness was about to change not just his life, but the entire galaxy. Jin-ho was eating his breakfast in the cafeteria when his supervisor, Mr. Kim, approached him with a worried expression on his face. Mr. Kim was holding an official-looking tablet, and his hands were shaking slightly. Jin-ho had never seen his supervisor look so nervous. "Before you need to come with me right now," Mr. Kim said in a quiet voice. "The Galactic Council has summoned you to the main chamber." Jin-ho nearly choked on his protein bar. He had never been summoned by the council before. No maintenance worker had ever been called to the main chamber in the entire history of the space station. What did I do wrong? Jin-ho asked, but Mr. Kim just shook his head and said he did not know. They walked through the corridors together, and Jin-ho noticed that other workers were staring at him. Some looked worried, while others seemed curious about what was happening. The main chamber was located in the center of the space station, and it was the most impressive room Jin-ho had ever seen. The ceiling was so high that it seemed to disappear into darkness, and the walls were covered with screens showing images from across the galaxy. Thousands of seats were arranged in a circle around a central platform where speakers could address the entire council. Jin-ho had only seen pictures of the main chamber before, and being inside it made him feel very small and insignificant. Hundreds of alien beings were seated in the chamber, representing different species from across the galaxy. Some were floating in the air, while others sat on special chairs designed for their unique body types. At the center of the chamber stood Ambassador Kale-tu. The crystal being was even more impressive in person than Jin-ho had imagined. His body was made of living crystal that changed colors as he moved, and his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once when he spoke human. Jin-ho, the ambassador said, and his voice echoed through the chamber. You have been brought here because you have demonstrated something that we believed your species was incapable of. Yesterday you showed true compassion without any expectation of reward or recognition. Jin-ho felt confused and scared. He did not understand why tying someone's shoelace was such a big deal to these advanced beings. He looked around the chamber and saw that all the aliens were staring at him with what seemed like curiosity and interest. The ambassador continued speaking. We have been observing your species for 50 years, and we have seen many examples of human behavior. Most of the time, humans act out of self-interest or because they expect something in return, but what you did yesterday was different. You helped another human simply because she needed help. Jin-ho wanted to say that what he did was normal and that any decent person would have done the same thing, but he was too nervous to speak in front of so many important beings. He just stood there and listened as the ambassador explained why his actions were so significant. As a reward for this demonstration of pure compassion, the ambassador announced, you may choose any one gift from our vast collection of technologies. You could ask for faster than light travel for your entire species, or unlimited energy for your planet, or cures for every disease that affects humanity. The chamber fell silent as Jin-ho considered this incredible offer. He could ask for anything that would benefit all of humanity. Technologies that could end poverty, hunger, and disease forever. He could ask for knowledge that would advance human civilization by thousands of years. But as Jin-ho thought about what to ask for, he found himself looking across the chamber at the section where the human translators and assistants were seated. Therein, the front row sat Haijin, the woman whose shoelace he had tied the day before. She was looking at him with an expression of hope and wonder. Without really thinking about it, Jin-ho made his decision. I want to make sure that she never has to worry about anything again, he said, pointing toward Haijin. Give her the best life possible with all the opportunities and technologies you can provide. The silence that followed was so complete that Jin-ho could hear his own heartbeat. The aliens in the chamber began making sounds that he assumed were expressions of surprise or shock. He had just used the most incredible opportunity in human history, not to benefit his entire species, but to help one person. Ambassador Kale-tu crystal body began pulsing with colors that Jin-ho had never seen before. The alien seemed to be experiencing some kind of strong emotion that his species rarely felt. Never in all our centuries of existence have we seen a being use such an opportunity for another individual rather than for themselves or their entire species. The ambassador paused and seemed to be consulting with other council members through some kind of telepathic communication. Then he turned back to Jin-ho, and his voice carried a weight that made everyone in the chamber pay attention. Very well, human, your request will be granted, but you must understand the price of your choice. She will be taken to the core worlds, where she will be given access to technologies and opportunities beyond anything any human has ever experienced. But the distance between your world and ours is vast, and the barriers between our species are strong. You will never see her again. Jin-ho felt his heart break as he heard those words. He looked at Haijin and saw that she had understood what the ambassador was saying. Tears were streaming down her face, and she was trying to stand up from her seat. But the energy barriers that surrounded the human section had activated and she could not move. Are you certain this is what you want? The ambassador asked. Jinho could ask for anything else, technologies that could transform human civilization forever. Knowledge that could make humanity equal to the most advanced species in the galaxy, but he had made his choice and he would not change it. Yes, Jinho said, and his voice was steady even though his heart was breaking. If it means she will be happy and safe and have every opportunity to succeed, then I accept. She deserves better than what this station can offer her. The ambassador gestured to several alien beings who approached Haijin. They were tall and graceful with silvery skin and large, gentle eyes. They spoke to her in soft voices, explaining that she would be taken to the core worlds immediately for the beginning of her new life. Jinho watched as Haijin was escorted from the chamber. She kept looking back at him with an expression of gratitude and sorrow. He wanted to run to her and tell her that everything would be all right. But he knew that this was goodbye forever. The transformation process began immediately. Haijin would be taken to the most advanced medical facilities in the galaxy where her body and mind would be enhanced to allow her to survive and thrive in environments that would kill an ordinary human. She would be given access to educational technologies that would expand her knowledge beyond anything she could imagine. As the ceremony concluded, Ambassador Kael'tu approached Jinho personally. The crystal being seemed different now, as if Jinho's actions had changed something fundamental about how he viewed humanity. What you have done today will not be forgotten, the ambassador said. Your sacrifice has shown us that there is more to your species than we previously understood. You have demonstrated that humans possess a form of intelligence that we have not encountered before, the ability to care more about another being's well-being than your own. Jinho nodded and thanked the ambassador, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Haijin and wondering if he would ever know whether she was happy in her new life. He hoped that she would remember him fondly and that she would make the most of the opportunities he had given her. The other humans in the chamber were looking at Jinho with a mixture of awe and confusion. They could not understand why he had given up such an incredible opportunity. Some thought he was foolish, while others began to see him as a hero who had sacrificed everything for love. As Jinho left the chamber and returned to his regular duties, he felt different. The other maintenance workers treated him with new respect, and the alien beings he encountered seemed to look at him with curiosity rather than indifference. Word of his sacrifice was already spreading throughout the station. That evening, Jinho sat in his small room and looked out at the stars. He wondered which of those distant points of light was the star that Haijin was traveling toward. He hoped that she was already beginning to experience the wonders of the technologies that would transform her life. Jinho did not know that his simple act of compassion and his incredible sacrifice had started something that would change the entire galaxy. The aliens were beginning to question their assumptions about humanity and about the nature of intelligence itself. What Jinho had done was not just unusual, it was revolutionary. The story of the maintenance worker who gave up everything for a stranger was spreading beyond the space station. Ambassador Kael'tu had filed reports that were being read by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They were all trying to understand what Jinho's actions meant for the future of interspecies relations. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Haijin was traveling toward her new life, but she could not stop thinking about Jinho and the incredible sacrifice he had made for her. She promised herself that she would find a way to honor his gift, and perhaps someday find a way to see him again. 6 months had passed since Haijin left the space station, and her new life on the core worlds was beyond anything she had ever imagined. The city where she lived was made entirely of crystal and floated among the stars like a jewel in the darkness. Her apartment was larger than most buildings on Earth and had windows that showed the most beautiful views of space. The aliens had kept their promise to Jinho. Haijin's mind had been enhanced with technology that allowed her to learn languages in minutes and understand complex concepts that would have taken years to master before. She could now communicate with thousands of different species and had become the first human to serve as a universal translator. Every morning, Haijin woke up in her floating bed and looked out at the infinite cosmos through her crystal windows. She had everything she could ever want: unlimited food that tasted better than anything on Earth, entertainment systems that could create any experience. She desired and access to the greatest libraries in the galaxy, but every night when she stood on her balcony and looked at the stars she thought about Jinho. She remembered his gentle hands tying her shoelace and the kindness in his eyes when he looked at her. She had tried to send messages back to the space station, but the distance was too great and the communication systems were not compatible. Jin had become famous throughout the core worlds as the human who had been elevated by an act of pure love. The aliens were fascinated by her story and wanted to understand how such a primitive species could produce such advanced emotional behavior. She gave speeches and participated in conferences about human psychology and social development. Meanwhile, back on the space station, Jinho had returned to his normal routine of cleaning and maintenance, but everything had changed. The story of his sacrifice had spread throughout the human population, and they looked at him with new respect and admiration. Some called him a hero, while others thought he was crazy for giving up such an opportunity. Admiral Park, the highest-ranking human military officer on the station, approached Jinho one day while he was working in the diplomatic wing. She was a stern woman in her 50s who had fought in the early conflicts with alien species, but had learned to work with them for the benefit of humanity. What you did has started something important, Admiral Park told Jinho. The aliens are talking about your sacrifice and questioning their assumptions about our species. Some of them are beginning to think that humans might be more advanced than they originally believed. Jinho continued mopping the floor. While he listened to the Admiral, he had never thought of himself as starting anything important. He had just helped someone who needed help, and then tried to make sure she would be safe. And HFY Choi, the station chief scientist, had been studying the effects of Jinho actions on both human and alien behavior. She discovered that the humans on the station had begun helping each other more often and working together more effectively. Productivity had increased, and conflicts had decreased significantly. The aliens have been monitoring our behavior patterns, Dr. Choi explained to Jinho during one of their conversations, and they are amazed by what they are seeing. Human cooperation and compassion levels have increased dramatically since your sacrifice. They are calling it the human paradox. Jinho did not fully understand what Dr. Choi was talking about, but he had noticed that his fellow workers were treating each other more kindly. He often found small gifts left in his locker, anonymous notes thanking him for his sacrifice, and invitations to join other workers for meals and social activities. The maintenance department had transformed under Jinho's quiet leadership. He shared his meals with workers who had less help repair broken equipment without being asked, and always made time to listen when someone needed to talk. Other departments began copying these behaviors, and soon the entire human section of the station was working together more harmoniously. Ambassador Kale had been observing these changes with great interest, the crystal being spent hours watching human interactions and trying to understand how Jinho's simple act of kindness had created such widespread positive effects. He had never seen anything like it in all his centuries of studying different species. The ambassador began conducting interviews with human workers, asking them about their motivations and feelings. He discovered that humans seemed to derive genuine pleasure from helping others and that they were willing to sacrifice their own comfort for the well-being of their community. These findings troubled Ambassador Kale because they challenged everything the Galactic Council believed about intelligence and civilization. The Council had always assumed that the most advanced species were those that maximized individual success and technological development, but humans seemed to have evolved something different on the core worlds. Jin was making her own discoveries about alien psychology. She had access to the most advanced research facilities in the galaxy and was studying the emotional development of different species. She found that most aliens had lost the capacity for selfless love somewhere in their evolutionary development. The aliens had become so focused on logic and efficiency that they had forgotten how to care for each other without expecting something in return. This had made them incredibly advanced technologically, but had also made their societies cold and empty. Many aliens reported feeling lonely and disconnected from their community. Jin began writing reports about her findings and sharing them with the Council. She argued that humans had not failed to develop advanced technology because they were primitive, but because they had evolved something more valuable, the ability to find happiness in the happiness of others. These reports created controversy throughout the galactic community. Some species argued that emotion was a weakness that held back progress, while others began to wonder if they had made a mistake in dismissing human capabilities. The debate grew more intense as more evidence emerged about human emotional intelligence. Back on the space station, Jinho continued his daily work, unaware that his name was being discussed on planets across the galaxy. He had developed a routine of leaving small gifts for his coworkers, a repaired tool here, a warm meal there, and encouraging words when someone was having a difficult day. The aliens on the station began to notice these behaviors and started studying them more closely. They were amazed to discover that humans seemed to have an unlimited capacity for kindness, and that they became happier when they helped others rather than when they helped themselves. Dr. Choi showed Jinho brain scans that revealed something remarkable. When humans helped others, their brains released chemicals that made them feel good. But when they helped themselves, the effect was much smaller. This was the opposite of what happened in most alien species. You have shown us something we never understood before, Dr. Choi explained to Jinho. Your species has evolved to be happiest when you are making others happy. This is not just unusual, it is revolutionary. It suggests that cooperation rather than competition might be the highest form of intelligence. Jinho found these scientific explanations interesting, but he did not need studies to tell him that helping others felt good. He had always known that making someone else's day better made his own day better too. He thought that most humans understood this instinctively. The changes on the station continued to spread. Human workers began volunteering for extra shifts to help their colleagues. They shared resources more freely, and they formed support groups for those who were struggling with personal problems. The aliens watched these developments with growing fascinations. Of the younger alien beings began trying to copy human behavior. They started helping each other without expecting rewards and discovered that it made them feel different in a way they had never experienced before. These experiments spread to other alien communities and began to change the culture of the entire station. Ambassador Kale too realized that something unprecedented was happening. The human concept of selfless love was spreading to other species and changing the fundamental nature of their society. He began to wonder if the Galactic Council had been wrong about the hierarchy of intelligence. The ambassador filed daily reports about the changes he was observing and recommended that the Council conduct a full review of their policies regarding human capabilities. He argued that humans might represent the next stage of evolutionary development rather than a primitive species that needed guidance. Meanwhile, Hyjin had become one of the most influential voices in galactic academia. Her research on human emotional intelligence was being studied by scholars across the universe, and her speeches about the importance of compassion were changing how aliens thought about their own societies. But despite all her success and influence, Hyjin still dreamed of returning to the space station. To see Jinho again, she had everything she had ever wanted except the one thing that mattered most to her, the chance to thank the man who had changed her life with a simple act of kindness. She began using her influence to research ways to travel back to human space. The distances were vast and the technology was complex, but Hyjin was determined to find a way. She owed Jinho more than she could ever repay, and she wanted him to know that his sacrifice had been worth it. The story of Jinho's sacrifice had traveled far beyond the space station, and was now being discussed on worlds across the galaxy. Alien philosophers were debating what they called the human paradox, while young beings of different species were trying to understand how a supposedly primitive race could demonstrate such advanced emotional intelligence. On the water world of Aquatica, the young mare people had heard the story and began performing their own acts of kindness. They started sharing their best fishing spots with strangers and helping elderly mare people with their daily tasks. The older generation was amazed by these changes and began to question their own selfish behaviors. The desert nomads of Sandros had lived for thousands of years following strict rules about water sharing. Each family guarded their water supplies jealously and never helped outsiders. But after hearing about Jinho, they began offering water to travelers and sharing their knowledge of desert survival. On the industrial world of Ferris, Two species had been fighting a bitter war for over 3 centuries. The conflict had started over mineral rights, but had grown into a cycle of revenge and hatred that seemed impossible to break. Both sides had developed powerful weapons, and neither was willing to negotiate. But when news of the Shoelace incident reached Ferris, something unexpected happened. A young soldier named Ketra was fighting in the trenches when he heard the story of Jinho on his communication device. He was so moved by the tale that he threw down his weapon and walked across the battlefield to help an injured enemy soldier. The fighting stopped as both armies watched in amazement as Ketra carried the wounded soldier to safety. The enemy soldier was so grateful that he refused to let his comrades shoot at Ketra. When the two sides met to discuss what had happened, they realized that they had forgotten why they were fighting in the first place. The war on Ferris ended not through victory or defeat, but through the simple recognition that caring for others was more important than winning. The peace treaty was signed in a ceremony that honored Jinho as the inspiration for their reconciliation, even though he knew nothing about it. Jinho had helped end a war that had lasted for centuries back on the space station. Jinho continued his quiet work, completely unaware that his name was being spoken on billions of worlds. He had developed a routine of small kindnesses that had become legendary among the human workers. He fixed broken equipment without being asked, shared his meals with anyone who was hungry, and always had time to listen to someone's problems. The other humans began copying Jinho behavior, and soon the entire human section of the station was working together with unprecedented cooperation. Workers who had never spoken to each other before became friends. Departments that had competed for resources began sharing freely and helping each other succeed. Admiral Park called a meeting of all human department heads to discuss the changes they were seeing. Human productivity had increased by 30%. Worker satisfaction was at an all-time high, and there had been no conflicts or disciplinary problems in months. The transformation was so dramatic that it was hard to believe. The aliens are taking notice, Admiral Park announced during the meeting. They are studying our behavior patterns and trying to understand how we have achieved such high levels of cooperation. Some of them are beginning to think that we might have something to teach them about social organization. Dr. Choi had been working with alien scientists to study the changes in human behavior. They discovered that humans were not just helping each other more, they were actually becoming happier and healthier as a result. The stress levels in the human population had dropped significantly and medical problems had decreased. The aliens were amazed by these findings. In most species, increased cooperation led to increased competition and conflict, as individuals fought for the limited rewards of helping others. But humans seemed to have an unlimited capacity for kindness and actually became more generous the more they gave. Ambassador Kale had been conducting his own research into human psychology and had made a startling discovery. Humans did not just help others because it made them feel good. They seemed to derive actual pleasure from seeing others succeed, even when they received no benefit themselves. This was revolutionary because it suggested that humans had evolved beyond the basic survival instincts that drove most intelligent species. Instead of being motivated primarily by self-interest, humans appeared to be motivated by something the ambassador called collective well-being. The ambassador shared his findings with the Galactic Council and proposed that they conduct a formal review of human classification. The Council had always considered humans to be a primitive species that needed guidance and protection, but the evidence suggested that humans might actually be more advanced than their alien supervisors. The debate that followed was intense and sometimes heated. Some council members argued that emotional intelligence was not real intelligence and that humans were still too primitive to be trusted with advanced technology. Others began to see that their own species might have lost something important in their pursuit of technological advancement on the core worlds. Hyjin was following these debates with great interest. She had become an expert on interspecies psychology and was often asked to provide testimony about human capabilities. She used every opportunity to tell the story of Jinho sacrifice and to explain how it represented the best of human nature during one particularly important council session. Hyjin was invited to address the assembled representatives from thousands of worlds. She stood before them wearing the simple clothes she preferred despite having access to the most advanced fashion in the galaxy. You have been asking the wrong question, she told the massive audience. You want to know how humans can be emotionally advanced despite our primitive technology, but what if emotional intelligence is the highest form of technology? What if caring for others is more advanced and faster than light travel? The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank. And if Heijin was correct, then the entire foundation of galactic civilization was built on an inferior model. The pursuit of individual advancement over collective welfare had created a society of incredible technology but limited wisdom. Heijin continued her speech by showing brain scans and behavioral studies that proved humans had evolved something unique: the ability to find genuine happiness in the happiness of others. Every other species seeks to maximize their own well-being, she explained, but humans have evolved to maximize collective well-being even at personal cost. The evidence was overwhelming. Humans consistently made choices that benefited their communities even when those choices hurt them individually. They shared resources freely, helped strangers without expecting rewards, and found meaning in making others' lives better. Some of the alien delegates began to realize that their own societies were missing something important. They had achieved incredible technological advancement, but their people were often lonely, isolated, and unhappy. The pursuit of individual success had created civilizations that were efficient, but empty. Ambassador Kale stood to address the assembly, and his crystal form was glowing with colors that indicated deep emotion. I have studied humans for months, and I have reached a conclusion. They are not primitive beings who need our guidance. They are advanced beings who might be able to guide us. The ambassador went on to explain that human emotional intelligence represented a form of evolution that most species had missed. In their rush to develop better technology, they had forgotten to develop better ways of living together. Humans had somehow managed to evolve both individually and collectively. The debate continued for days, with representatives from different worlds sharing their observations of human behavior. Some had noticed that human colonies were more stable and harmonious than their own settlements. Others had observed that humans seemed to have lower rates of mental illness and social conflict. Dr. Choi had been invited to present her scientific findings to the council, and her data supported everything that Heijin had been saying. Human brains were literally wired differently than alien brains, with neural pathways that made them feel good when they helped others. These findings suggested that humans were not just behaving differently by choice. They had actually evolved differently. Their brains produced chemicals that rewarded cooperative behavior and punished selfish behavior. This was the opposite of what happened in most intelligent species. The implications were staggering. If humans were correct about the importance of emotional intelligence, then the entire galactic civilization needed to be restructured. The focus on individual achievement and technological advancement would need to be balanced with attention to collective well-being and social harmony. Some of the younger alien delegates began to propose changes to their own societies. They wanted to experiment with human-style cooperation and see if it could improve their quality of life. The older delegates were more skeptical, but even they had to admit that human behavior was producing remarkable results. On the space station, Jinho had no idea that his simple act of kindness was causing such dramatic changes across the galaxy. He was focused on his daily work and on the small ways he could help his fellow humans. He had been promoted to head of maintenance, not because he asked for it, but because the other workers had unanimously requested it. Under Jinho leadership, the maintenance department, the Festival of Minds, was the most important intellectual gathering in the known universe. It happened once every 10 years and brought together the greatest thinkers, philosophers, and scientists from across the galaxy. This year, the festival had a special focus on consciousness and intelligence, and Heijin had been invited as the keynote speaker. The festival took place on a massive space station that was even larger than the one where Jinho worked. Representatives from 10,000 different worlds gathered in the great amphitheater to hear speeches and participate in debates about the nature of intelligence and consciousness. Jin had spent weeks preparing for her presentation. She knew that this was her chance to change how the entire galaxy thought about humanity and emotional intelligence. She wore a simple white dress that reminded her of her old uniform on the space station and carried a small device that would project her words to the entire audience standing before the assembled representatives from across the universe. Hai-Jin began her speech with words that would be remembered for generations. "You have all been asking the wrong question," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "You want to know how humans can be so emotionally advanced despite our primitive technology. But the real question is, what if emotional intelligence is the highest form of technology?" The audience fell silent as they considered her words. Hai-Jin continued by showing brain scans, behavioral studies, and social analyses that proved humans had evolved something that no other species possessed: the ability to find genuine happiness in the happiness of others. Explained that every other species in the galaxy sought to maximize their own well-being, but humans had evolved to maximize collective well-being even at personal cost. This was not just unusual behavior, it was evolutionarily superior because it created more stable and harmonious societies. The evidence was overwhelming. Human colonies had lower crime rates, less conflict, and higher levels of mental health than colonies of any other species. Human workers were more productive when they worked together than when they competed against each. Other human societies were more stable and lasted longer than societies based on individual achievement, but the most important finding was that humans seemed to have unlimited capacity for kindness. The more they helped others, the more they wanted to help, rather than depleting their resources of compassion. Helping others actually increased their ability to Kurehi Jin told the story of Jinho's sacrifice and explained how his simple act of kindness had created a ripple effect that was still spreading across the galaxy. She showed videos of the changes on the space station, the peace treaty on Ferris, and the acts of kindness that were happening on worlds throughout the galaxy. The implications are staggering, she told the audience. If humans are correct about the importance of emotional intelligence, then our entire galactic civilization has been built on an inferior model. We have focused on individual advancement and technological progress while ignoring the most important aspect of intelligence, the ability to care for others. Ambassador Kael'tu had been waiting for this moment. He stood up in the audience and his crystal form glowed with colors that indicated deep emotion. "I have spent months studying human behavior, and I have reached a conclusion that will shock many of you. These humans, whom we dismissed as primitive, may actually represent the next stage of evolutionary development." Ambassador explained that he had observed Jinho and the other humans on the space station and had seen something that challenged everything he believed about intelligence. The humans had achieved something that his own species had lost long ago: the ability to love unconditionally. "I propose," the ambassador continued, "that we have been wrong about the hierarchy of intelligence. We have measured advancement by technological capability, but we should have been measuring it by the capacity for compassion. These humans have mastered the most difficult skill in the universe: selfless love." The debate that followed was intense and sometimes heated. Representatives from different worlds shared their own observations of human behavior. Some had noticed that human traders were more honest than traders from other species. Others had observed that human diplomats were more successful at resolving conflicts. Dr. Choi had been invited to present her scientific findings, and her data supported everything that Hai-Jin and Ambassador Kael'tu had been saying. Human brains were fundamentally different from alien brains, with neural pathways that made cooperation and kindness feel good. The humans have evolved beyond the basic survival instincts that drive most intelligent species. Dr. Choi explained their brains are wired to reward helping others and to punish selfish behavior. This is not just different, it is superior because it creates more stable and successful societies. Some of the alien delegates began to argue that emotion was a weakness that held back progress. They pointed out that their own species had achieved incredible technological advancement by focusing on logic and efficiency rather than feelings, but other delegates countered that their technological advancement had come at a cost. Their societies were often cold and empty, with high rates of mental illness and social conflict. They had gained the ability to travel between stars, but had lost the ability to care for each other. The debate continued for days, with representatives from different worlds sharing their experiences and observations. Gradually, a consensus began to emerge that humans represented something new and important in the galaxy, their emotional intelligence was not a weakness but a strength that could benefit all species. Meanwhile, back on the space station, Jinho was completely unaware of the cosmic debates that were taking place. He continued his daily work of cleaning and maintenance, but he had begun to notice that something was changing. The aliens he worked with were treating him and the other humans with more respect. Some of the alien workers had begun trying to copy human behavior. They helped each other with their tasks, shared resources more freely, and seemed to be experimenting with the concept of kindness. Jinho found these changes encouraging and did what he could to help them understand human values. Choi had returned to the station after the festival, and she sought out Jinho to tell him about the impact he was having on the galaxy. She explained that his simple act of kindness had started a movement that was changing how aliens thought about intelligence and consciousness. Jinho, the changes you have inspired are spreading throughout the galaxy, she told him while they sat in the station cafeteria. Your sacrifice for hygiene has become a symbol of human potential and has challenged the basic assumptions that have governed galactic civilization for centuries. Jinho found it hard to believe that tying someone's shoelace could have such far-reaching effects. He had always thought of himself as ordinary and his actions as normal. He could not understand why the aliens found human kindness so remarkable, but Dr. Choi explained that most species had lost the ability to care for others without expecting something in return. They had become so focused on individual success that they had forgotten the joy of helping others. This was why Jinho's behavior seemed so revolutionary to them. The conversation was interrupted by an announcement over the station communication system. All human workers were being summoned to the main amphitheater for an important announcement. Jinho and Dr. Choi joined the crowd of humans walking through the corridors. Wondering what this could be about, Admiral Park was waiting in the amphitheater along with several high-ranking alien officials. The Admiral looked excited and nervous as she prepared to address the assembled humans. Jinho noticed that Ambassador Kailtu was also present, his crystal form glowing with anticipation. The Admiral began her announcement by explaining that the Galactic Council had been debating human status for months. The debates had been intense and sometimes contentious, but a decision had finally been reached. The Council had voted to reclassify humans as a first-tier species. The crowd of humans erupted in cheers and applause. First-tier status meant that humans would have equal rights with the most advanced species in the galaxy. They would be allowed to participate in galactic government, have access to advanced technologies, and be treated as equals rather than servants. But Admiral Park held up her hand for silence and announced that there was more. The Council had also voted to establish a new program called the Compassion Initiative based on human emotional intelligence. The goal was to help all species develop the capacity for selfless love and cooperation. Jinho felt overwhelmed by these announcements. He had never wanted to be famous or to change the galaxy. He had simply wanted to help someone who needed help. But apparently his actions had inspired changes that would affect billions of beings across the universe. As the celebration continued, Jinho found himself thinking about hygiene and wondering if she knew about these developments. He hoped that she was happy and successful in her new life, but he also wondered if she ever thought about him. And the moment they had shared, he did not know that at that very moment Hyjin was working on a plan that would bring their story full circle. She had used her influence and position to research ways to return to the space station. The technology was complex and dangerous, but she was determined to find a way. The universe was about to learn that the most advanced technology was not an energy, but the gentle art of caring for another soul. And it had all started with a man. The anniversary of the Shoelace incident, as it had come to be known throughout the galaxy, was approaching, and the Galactic Council had decided to hold a special ceremony to commemorate the event that had changed the course of galactic history. Representatives from every known species would gather to witness something unprecedented. Yi Jin had been chosen to deliver the keynote address at the ceremony. She was now recognized as one of the most important figures in galactic civilization, and her research on human emotional intelligence had become required reading in schools across the universe. But despite all her success, she had never stopped thinking about Jinho. For months, Hyjin had been secretly working with the most advanced scientists in the galaxy to develop a technology that would allow her to return to the space station. The distances were vast and the energy requirements were enormous, but she had finally found a way. The technology was called quantum consciousness transfer, and it would allow her to instantly transport herself across any distance by converting her consciousness into quantum energy and reconstructing it at the destination. The process was dangerous and had never been tested on a living being, but Haijin was willing to take the risk. The ceremony was held in the Great Assembly, a massive structure that existed in folded space-time and allowed beings from across the universe to participate. Representatives from millions of worlds gathered to witness what many considered the most important event in galactic history. Haijin stood at the center of the assembly wearing the same simple white dress she had worn at the Festival of Minds. She looked out at the sea of alien faces and thought about Jin Ho, who was millions of light years away, completely unaware of the cosmic significance of his simple act of kindness before. You vote on the future of galactic civilization. Haijin began. I want you to know something about the human who started all of this. Jin Ho does not know about any of these debates. He does not know that his simple act of kindness changed the course of galactic history. He is still on that space station, still helping others, still living the same values that brought us all here today. The assembly fell silent as Haijin continued her speech. She explained that Jin Ho had never sought fame or recognition. He had simply seen someone who needed help and had helped her without expecting anything in return. This was the essence of human emotional intelligence, the ability to care for others without expecting rewards. You can vote to establish the Compassion Initiative, and that would be wonderful. Haijin said, her voice growing stronger, but I want to make a different proposal. I want to use my position, my influence, and all the technology you have given me for just one thing, the chance to go back and hold his hand. The silence that followed was absolute. Here was a being who had achieved the highest possible status in galactic civilization, who had access to technologies that could reshape reality itself, asking only for the chance to return to a simple human connection. Ambassador Kale stood up in the assembly, and his crystal form was glowing with colors that indicated joy and admiration. Members of the Galactic Council, he said, I have spent the last year studying these humans, and I have reached a conclusion. They are not just ready for equal status. They are ready to lead us all to something better. The ambassador explained that he had observed the changes on the space station and had seen how human emotional intelligence was transforming the entire community. Beings from dozens of different species were learning to cooperate and care for each other in ways that had never been possible before. I proposed that we do more than just establish the Compassion Initiative, Ambassador Kale continued. I propose that we restructure galactic civilization around human values. Technology will still advance, but it will be guided by the principle that true intelligence means caring for others above oneself. The debate that followed was brief because the evidence was overwhelming. Every species that had adopted human-style cooperation had seen improvements in their quality of life. Crime rates had dropped, mental illness had decreased, and overall happiness had increased dramatically. The vote was unanimous, not just for the Compassion Initiative, but for something unprecedented. The Great Convergence, a galaxy-wide shift toward the human model of civilization. Technology would still be important, but it would be balanced with attention to emotional intelligence and collective well-being. As the cosmic celebration began, Haijin felt a familiar tingling in her enhanced neural pathways. The Council had given her a final gift as recognition of her contributions to galactic civilization, the quantum consciousness transfer technology that would allow her to return to Jin Ho. Meanwhile, on the space station, Jin Ho was finishing his evening rounds as he had done every day for the past year. He had no idea that his name was being celebrated on billions of worlds, or that his simple act of kindness had fundamentally changed the nature of galactic civilization. He was walking through the diplomatic wing where he had first met Haijin when reality suddenly shimmered around him. The air seemed to sparkle with energy, and time itself seemed to slow down. Jin Ho stopped walking and looked around in confusion. Then she was there, not the enhanced being she had become, but simply Haijin, looking at him with eyes full of tears and gratitude. She was wearing the same translator uniform she had worn on the day he tied her shoelace, and she looked exactly as he remembered her. Jin Ho Hai Jin whispered, and her voice was soft and warm. You gave me everything, and I never got to thank you properly. I never got to tell you how your kindness changed, not just my life, but the entire galaxy. Jinho stood frozen in amazement. He had dreamed of seeing Hai Jin again, but had never believed it was possible. The distance between them had seemed impossible to cross, and he had accepted that he would never know what had happened to her, but you were supposed to stay on the core worlds, Jinho said, his voice filled with concern. What about your new life and all the opportunities they gave you? Are you throwing all of that away to come back? Hirahijin smiled and shook her head. I did not throw anything away, she said. I used everything they gave me to find a way back to you. They enhanced my mind and gave me access to the greatest technologies in the galaxy, and I used all of it to solve the one problem that mattered most to Mesh explained that her research on human emotional intelligence had become the foundation for a new understanding of consciousness and intelligence. The galaxy was changing because of what Jinho had started, and she wanted him to know that his sacrifice had been worth it. The changes you inspired are spreading throughout the universe. Hai-Jin told him wars are ending, species are learning to cooperate, and billions of beings are discovering the joy of helping others. Your simple act of kindness has become the model for a new kind of civilization. Jinho felt overwhelmed by this news. He had never wanted to change the galaxy. He had just wanted to help someone who needed help, but apparently his actions had inspired changes that would affect countless generations of beings across the universe. As Jinho reached out to take Hai-Jin's hand, their gesture was observed by billions of beings across the galaxy. Through the quantum communication network, the moment their fingers intertwined, something beautiful happened. The very fabric of space-time seemed to pulse with warmth, and every conscious being in the universe felt for just an instant what it meant to love someone more than yourself. The sensation spread from world to world and species to species, creating a moment of universal connection that transcended all barriers of distance, language, and biology. For one perfect moment, every being in the galaxy understood what Jinho had known all along, that the highest form of intelligence was the capacity to care for others. The effects of this moment of connection were immediate and profound. On worlds where conflicts had raged for centuries, weapons were laid down and peace treaties were signed. Species that had never communicated before began reaching out to each other with offers of friendship and cooperation. The galaxy had learned that the highest technology was not the manipulation of matter and energy, but the gentle art of caring for another soul. It had all started with a man who knelt down to tie a woman's shoelace, expecting nothing in return but the simple joy of helping someone he cared about. As Jinho and Hai-Jin stood together in the corridor where their story had begun, they knew that they had witnessed something miraculous. The universe itself had been changed by love, and their simple human connection had become the foundation for a new kind of civilization. The future stretched